Pittsburgh Ballet Theater School is training the next generation of professional dancers by providing ballet and dance education of the highest caliber that prepares students for professional careers in dance. PBT's school focuses on the dancer as a whole person and nurturing them into creative, confident, and well-rounded individuals. They welcome students of all levels, interests, and backgrounds, and foster an equitable and inclusive environment. The school features individualized men's programming, emphasis on whole dancer health, nurtured student choreography opportunities, offers international students visas, as well as a wide array of performing opportunities. Full scholarships are available for men's training, including year-round tuition from September through May, 2-week company experience workshops, 5-week intensive summer program, and more. Pittsburgh Ballet Theater School's intensive summer program runs from June 25th to July 29th. Auditions are held across the country January 7th through February 12th, with a virtual audition on January 13th. Learn more about Pittsburgh Ballet Theater School and their intensive summer program at pbt.org, or click the link in the description of this episode. If you are in the Houston area, see Dance Theatre of Harlem with Performing Arts Houston on February 3rd and 4th. Visit the Performing Arts Houston website to learn more about the performance and other upcoming shows, including 4 multidisciplinary world premieres by Houston artists Anthony Brandt, J.E. Hernandez, Vivalda Dula, and Tazeen Zahida. All 4 new works will be presented in festival format at New Now, the Houston Artist Commissioning Project, on February 24th and 25th. Tickets are available at performingartshouston.org. Welcome to Conversations on Dance. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the podcast through your favorite app to be automatically notified of new episodes when they go live. While you are there, please take a moment to leave us a review. Leaving a review takes just a second and goes a long way in helping us grow the podcast and supports us in this endeavor. We appreciate you joining us today. Now, let's get to the episode. I'm Rebecca King Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance. On today's episode of Conversations on Dance, we are joined by choreographer and incoming artistic director of Dance Theatre of Harlem, Robert Garland. Robert began his dance training in Philadelphia, where he first saw DTH perform as a child. He continued his training at Juilliard before joining DTH as a company member. He eventually reached the rank of principal and began work in various leadership roles as a teacher and choreographer. We talked to Robert about having the legendary Arthur Mitchell as a mentor, the wide range of his choreographic inspirations, and his appointment in June 2023 to artistic director of the company he has long called home. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have so many exciting things to get to talking with you about, but we always start with our guests about their origins in dance. So we'd be curious to hear a little bit about how you first became interested in ballet and what got you into it.
You know, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, a very, very newly formed Dance Theatre of Harlem came to Philadelphia to perform. Arthur Mitchell had been commissioned by something called the Eucharistic Congress, which is a religious laity organization. And so he had been commissioned to do a work that was dedicated to the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, who had just recently passed away. And the big draw for my city of Philadelphia was its native, Marian Anderson, the very famous African-American contralto singer, and who was a good friend of Arthur Mitchell's as well. That was my first engagement with Dance Theatre of Harlem in Philadelphia. Marian Anderson reading text, and these dancers out there on these things I would eventually learn were called point shoes.
So how did that inspire you then to get into dance? Were you begging your parents to get into classes, or how exactly did that go down afterwards?
Well, you know, I saw the performance. I clearly wanted dance classes. My dad wasn't that into it, but eventually my mother took me, by the time I was 13 years old, I was very old when I started, and took me to take classes at a school that she'd found in downtown Philadelphia. And so that's sort of how it started. It kind of happened very naturally. It was something that she thought I just would do well in.
Mhm.
And did you always focus on ballet? Were you looking at other techniques too? What was that part of your training
Well,
like?
the interesting thing was I started dancing at the same time at Pennsylvania Ballet, which is now
Ah,
Philadelphia Ballet.
mm-hmm.
So I was taking classes there, and I was also taking classes at this something called the Philadelphia School for Dance Arts, where it was a school that was much like way back in the 80s and the 70s. There was a place in New York called Clark Center, which was kind of a hub, a kind of a steps for the Black dancers at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So there was ballet, there was Dunham, there was Horton, there were all the different classes. And so that's a type of place I started dancing in as well. So the combination of the ballet and the other thing kind of put me on this path. And I eventually ended up dancing with what was then a small modern dance company in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Dance Company.
Mhm.
And so went there, and then I ended up in New York at Juilliard and marched my way over to Dance Theatre of Harlem after that.
Right. I'm curious, what made you decide, if you're dancing professionally at such a young age, why did you think, okay, I want to take a step back and go to Juilliard for a second and sort of focus on the educational aspect before I go back to professional career?
Well, you know, it was very odd. The company that I danced in, I at the time was 14 and 15 years old, but the people I danced with were 21, 22. Most had undergrad degrees already, and they were Black, you know, and so it was like a very interesting group of people. But again, it was something that was done after either their school, their college work, or after their regular jobs. Some were bank tellers, some were, you know, all kinds of just normal people, security guards
Right.
that came together to do this art. But the fascinating thing about that period was that one day we looked up and Alvin Ailey was standing in the doorway, and he began to hire those dancers. So there was a period when I was at Juilliard where the Ailey Company had about 6 or 7 members from the Philadelphia Dance Company as a part of their professional company, and sort of started kind of a place where talent kind of went through before they went to the Ailey Company. So
Right.
that's sort of how that happened. So I was a baby of the bunch, but and being that baby of the bunch, you know, my mom was like, "You're going to go to college." Everybody was like, "You're going to go to college." So I went, you know, and went to Juilliard.
And so then from there, where you think, so Ailey's around, is that something that you had your eye on, or was it always Dance Theatre of Harlem? I love that was like the beginning of your origin story. It's such a beautiful
Well,
full
you know,
circle.
yeah, I lived with a very famous dancer with Ailey at the time. His name was Gary DeLoach. And the deal was I go on the road with Ailey and you watch my plants. And I was a horrible plant watcher. But he let me live there for the entire time I studied at Juilliard.
Wow, yeah.
And then it got to the awkward moment when it was like, you know, I think I'm going to go to Dance Theatre of Harlem. Like the expectation of a lot of people was that I was going to go to Ailey, and I decided to go to Dance Theatre of Harlem. And it was funny because people would always say, so why did you decide to go to go to Dance Theatre of Harlem instead of Ailey after living around those people for so long? And then they would answer their own question by saying the rep. I was like, yeah, it's the rep. It's the repertoire.
Right. Everything that I've read from your previous interviews, you're a big bunhead, right? You like ballet a lot, which is, I mean, that's what we come from too.
Right.
I really do. I really do. I found that, you know, classical ballet did not draw me. When I began to really understand that the balancing aesthetic fit me was when I got to Dance Theatre of Harlem and started learning that work. And it was literally the dance for dance sake that I had practiced in the Black modern dance environment. It was the same approach. There was no story. It was about the movement. And so I caught into it very well. You know, a lot of my instructors at Juilliard were very happy because there was a huge, like, kind of row between the Balanchine folks and the Juilliard folks at that time. But that's for another podcast.
What were some of the first Balanchine works that you danced that made you kind of get this feeling of like, oh, this is right for me and right for my body?
Oh, God. You know, from viewing the ballet because, you know, ballets go through, especially the Balanchine aesthetic, a lot of different adjustments and stuff.
Right.
And so, but the version of Four Temperaments, that Dance Theatre of Harlem did, I believe, is the quintessential version of how the ballet should always have been danced. And that was my first rehearsal in a balancing ballet in a role that Arthur Mitchell danced, he was rehearsing me, which was phlegmatic. Yeah, it was good, but it was an unfortunate day because the night before he caught me like in a foreign city, a little tipsy. And so the next day he was not happy with me, and I was like, I don't know. I always tell people I don't know what I did. I said, I know I just did the best I can. And he was fine after that.
Oh, let's talk a little bit about him, because we always say we were in communication with him to have him on the podcast right before he passed away. And so we're so sad we never got the chance to talk to him, but we love talking with dancers who have had that one-on-one experience with him. So what was it like dancing for him and working with him? And what was he like in these rehearsal environments?
You know, it's so funny going back to that. And we were in, what city were we in? I believe it was South America, definitely. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was Caracas. Wow. And so, like I said, me and my roommate have been hanging out,
mm-hmm.
you know. And so what I didn't realize, which I'm about to realize, mm-hmm. is that when he got to a city, he didn't go to his room and then figure out what to eat, you know, and hang out. He actually had to go meet with presenters. Right. Meet with the people that brought them there. Like he had a whole agenda. Mm. And so he was coming back from this agenda at the time. And so he saw myself and my friend, Keith Thomas. And it was like a cartoon where, you know, the person starts really small, far away from you. And then as he get closer, they become like 9-10 feet tall. Uh-huh. And I remember him looking down at me and saying, young man, you're representing something larger than yourself. Oh. And then he walked away. Literally walked away. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting. You know, of course, this was Dance Theatre of Harlem was founded right at the very tail end of the civil rights movement and inspired by the untimely death of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So Arthur Mitchell took that seriously. Mm-hmm. He took it seriously. He not only embedded us with, of course, our background in ballet, but also our background as Black people. It is one of the few places where, as a dancer, you held Balanchine in high esteem, and you also held Jeffrey Holder in high esteem, or Garth Fagan, or some of the other African-American choreographers that Arthur Mitchell always took a risk on in hiring. So he was a wonderfully open, spiritual, and smart man. Mm-hmm. You know, we started the organization with $25,000 of his own money, you know, which I was talking to our board the other day, actually. I was like, I wish we could figure that out, you know, and what today's dollars was. And someone did, and they said that would be $200,000.
Oh my gosh.
You know, it's really kind of amazing. But he said that he learned that from the church. He said his mother told him, tie 10% to the church and tie 10% to yourself, you know, and he just always did it. He always did, you know, and so he ended up having some seed money along with Cicely Tyson helping as well to found the organization.
Right. I love that. It seems like he was teaching you how to present yourself as people too. I mean, it seems like he was a mentor in a larger way than just like, let's make good dancers. And one of the ways that you've spoken about that I love is you said that he had you teaching, I think even running the school before you were at all ready. You felt ready to do that. And you said it took years, but that he was creating something, like harnessing a talent in an individual that maybe that person didn't even realize was there yet.
You know, to this day, and it bothers me a bit. It bothers me a bit with my education at Juilliard and any of the higher college kind of programming that happens, that they don't tell the dancers enough about the business of dance. You know, so I came out with a lot of dance experience, but, you know, I was at Dance Theatre of Harlem. I was an apprentice. I was a soloist. I was eventually a principal. Then Mr. Mitchell allowed me to choreograph my first ballet. But then he told me I had to go around the corner and talk to some woman. Her name was Patricia Brownstein, was like, who's Patricia Brown? It's like, well, you have to go talk to her, tell her about the ballet that you're doing, blah, blah, blah. I later learned she was a development director, and I had no idea, because for me, all that existed was Arthur Mitchell and my ballet mistress. Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think he was aware of that, that was about to become a huge deficit, in terms of our learning. So he implanted in all of us that idea. So it's no mistake that at ALE, we have Melanie Person, who is runs the school there and she was a former Dance Theatre of Harlem dancer. Alicia Graff Mack of Juilliard is running a program there. And Dion Figgins has taken over Ballet Tech after Elliot Feld, of all people. So he somehow weirdly embedded in his environment something bigger than just learning to be a dancer.
Did you feel like there was a moment where he kind of saw that in you, right? Where like maybe he saw that you might have a leadership quality, that he saw that you might have a knack for choreography. Did you feel like there was a moment where he kind of started looking at you in that way too?
There was. I had choreographed. One of our colleagues had passed away an untimely death due to AIDS, actually. And so I choreographed a solo for Virginia for his memorial. And so he was aware of it through that. But again, that was a memorial. Right. But over the years, he did see me as moving or wanting to do more in that arena. Arthur Mitchell is the only person that ever hired Bessie Schoenberg to be on staff. Bessie Schoenberg is the great composition teacher who also has the Bessies named after her. And so with Arthur Mitchell hired her, and she worked with both the school and she worked with the company as well with dancers that wanted to pursue careers. Donald Byrd of Spectrum Dance Theater is one of those people from that program, and the list goes on. So again, Arthur Mitchell was always thinking ahead of himself in that regard, and saw Bessie as someone that could do great things at Dance Theatre of Harlem for dancers that wanted to do work.
Right. What were some of your early works like? What kind of made you get an itch to choreograph?
It's really strange. When I started dancing with the company, it was nearing the end of Virginia's tenure as a ballerina with us. And we were doing like really, really huge opera houses. So all the ballets are like humongous, like Fall River Legend and Giselle, A Streetcar Named Desire by Valerie Bettis. And there were other works that we did. We were still doing the Balanchine, but some of the theater stuff that we did, that was a lot of Virginia near the end of her career that she did, kind of always stuck with me. So early on, I was doing like these really huge things and they had moving parts and, and I was also fascinated by some of Mr. Balanchine's work in that regard as well. His Liebeslieder Waltzer had that, that was also there too. I was discovering Balanchine in that way, and then after a while, I did well, but then I went hugely over budget on a John Adams ballet. And so and Miss Mitchell came to me. He was like, young man, next time it's lights and tights. That's all it is lights and tights. And I was like, okay, and so my first hit came from that, which was my ballet Return, which is set to the music of James Brown and Aretha Franklin, and is literally only costumes and lights. But it really, and a small cast to 12 people, Right. And that's when I really learned that you don't need like Fall River Legend churches that turn into houses, that turn into gallows. Like you don't need all that. You can really you can do what you always loved, Robert, which was dance for dancing.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about that decision to use popular music and how that still resonates with you and why you're still using it compared to, you've used Bach and other great classical composers before. What made that switch for you or made that musically interesting?
Well, in order to tell efficiently, the African American trajectory in America, you have to at one point pass through the standard bearers of our culture. And there's that. And quite honestly, when I did return, it was right at the beginning, I think, of the very aggressive advertising that we've all become used to seeing. Mm-hmm. Advertising with music and jingles. And when I say music, I don't mean, because there was a day, in fact, if I'm old enough to remember the TV series Bewitched, but the husband of Bewitched was a jingle writer. Like, they used to hire jingle writers, like this song and ba-ba-da-ba, and so they jettisoned the jingle writer, and in came the African-American music. Mm-hmm. And so, which was a little troublesome for me, because I felt that this music held much more than just its ability to sell a hamburger. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's sort of where I went with both Return and then my latest ballet, Higher Ground, which is reflective of the current zeitgeist that we're experiencing in terms of social justice within America.
Let's talk about this piece, Higher Ground. It's set to the music of Stevie Wonder. It's going to be at Performing Arts Houston, February 3rd and 4th. Tell us a little bit about that, the impetus for this particular work.
But right before the pandemic, it was choreographed in 2019, the ballet. I saw what was happening in the world with the current, politics of the administration that was in power at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remembered, and then there was an impeachment, Mm-hmm. And so for when I was growing up, I remember there was a song, with one of the songs in the ballet that I used, You Haven't Done Nothing, which was Stevie Wonder's message to then President Nixon, who had escaped impeachment, but probably would have been if he had not resigned. Right. And so I remember as a child trying to understand and put that together in my head, that, wow, like, this really powerful person clearly has done enough for not only the country to act, but also one of my favorite musical artists to step into the fray of that. And ever since that moment, Stevie Wonder has always been kind of the standard bearer. I call him the conscience of Black America. Or I say it, well, the full statement is, if Black people are the conscience of America, then Stevie Wonder is the conscience of Black America. And, so it's not for nothing that who was down in Georgia for the recent runoff election? Stevie Wonder. Who played an anthem in California for the first Black female mayor of Los Angeles? Stevie Wonder, So he is really that person, just an icon.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like anytime you see or hear an interview with any other musical icon, and they always say, like, they would not be who they are without Stevie Wonder. So I think paying tribute to him through dance is just such a beautiful thing to have. Yeah,
exactly. So I choreographed the ballet, which was reflective of that moment in 2018 and 2019. Then we went into the pandemic. The ballet never premiered in 2020, as it was supposed to have. Then we had the George Floyd protests. And so then we came out on the other side of all of that with the premiere of this ballet. And weirdly, the ballet fit exactly what had occurred during the pandemic.
So you didn't make changes to reflect the time.
Yes. And I have to say, I really love the ballet. It is a theater ballet. It's not about dance,
right?
But it says something, I think is very important for people to not only witness orally, but also see physical bodies representing that as well.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your soon-to-be role as artistic director of the company. I think one thing that's really unique and wonderful about it is that DTH is now going to be one of the few companies that has this total through line. I mean, how much did you, of course, you were talking about Arthur, but like Virginia obviously had such an impact on you as well. And you are keeping that lineage. So what's one way that you think that that's going to impact or bring some consistency to the company's overall importance and place in ballet culture?
You know, my career as a choreographer, I've always done a lot of work at Dance Theatre of Harlem, so I had very little opportunity to work outside of my current environment. But with that said, whenever the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, has stepped in, I've always had an opportunity to be in a place for a protracted amount of time to watch really, really, or be with really, really important people. Peter Martins was one of those people. You know, I worked with him for in a collaboration with New York City Ballet, which was over about a year and a half, actually. Monica Mason at the Royal Ballet, who was a wonderful, I just loved Monica and my time with her. And then most recently, San Francisco, I'm premiering a ballet in January in San Francisco with Helgi Tomasin, you know, who is retiring, but he got to see my ballet and just had wonderful things to just offer and say about that. So I say all that to say that our lineage is actually quite connected to a lot of different places. The Dance Theatre of Harlem lineage, of course, is that I danced with the company and that I worked directly with Arthur Mitchell. But it's even a little bigger than that. I really, really believe that our alumni, even our board of directors, some of whom I've spoken with since the announcement of my moving into the artistic director chair, are all very unique people. And so it couldn't be any better. I think one of the first decisions that I made was to have Ty Jimenez, a former ballerina with the company, who, when the company went on that hiatus, I was a principal at Boston Ballet. She will be coming in as a school director. So it's just a very easy fit. The other day, myself and Ty went to go see Alicia Graff and her students at Juilliard in a new Works concert. And, you know, it's just like we're family. We're just family. I was actually laughing at Alicia because she was the most excited person in theater, like whooping and going like, I was like, Ty, look at Alicia. Oh my God, she's losing her mind. It's so cute.
Yeah.
You know,
So
I love Ty so much. And I have to say, like, when I think of someone that would run a school well, like, and in terms of temperament, like Ty came in, I was there in BB2 when she came in as a principal, which is already a hard thing to do if you don't know many people and you're coming in at the top. But she was, I think, always the kindest principal to the youngest people, you know? So I myself am insecure about being there and building my relationship in this new company, fresh out of school. But Ty was always just there with like her warmth and generosity. So I just think that she's such a wonderful person to be running that organization. She is a
wonderful, wonderful person. And I'm so excited. I didn't know that, Michael, actually. I have to tell her.
We have to get her on the pod. That would be so fun.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk after this to get that figured out. But I really think that it speaks so much to the organization, the way that so many people, even if they leave, they come back to Dance Theatre of Harlem, because that's just not something that you always see. And I think it says something too about the leadership, that they also want these people with the DNA of the company to come back. And I wonder what it means to you to kind of have Arthur Mitchell's like sign off on this a little bit, right? Like he did see you in a position of leadership. And now, even though he's not here, you must feel a little bit like he would have approved of your being appointed the artistic director.
You know, there was some conversation initially before Virginia came on about whether I would fit into that role at that moment. But he said specifically to me, he said, you know, he's like, I really want you to just live your life creating work for, you know, a second more, because he knew that, you know, that other thing is another thing, you know. And so I'm just overjoyed that I'm able to, at this moment, do this work, because I feel like it's extremely timely. And I kind of feel like he might have known that it was going this way to begin with, you know.
Make you feel good.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of your plans for the company? Like what things you feel right now are very strong and that you want to hold on to and bolster, and what things you're looking to maybe expand or change in the future?
Of course, I am interested in continuing our kind of relationship with Mr. Ballantyne's legacy. I think it's important in so many different ways. And I'm hoping that I can even draw a more detailed picture because sometimes Arthur Mitchell's life gets watered down to the black guy that was in New York City Ballet and the guy that started a company for black people. But there was a tremendous amount of intellectual curiosity that he had that I'm hoping to kind of uplift a little more, just in terms of the history of the man himself.
Right.
And for the organization itself, I really would like to have a larger company that could do larger works. I did a competition in Brazil about right before the pandemic, about I think 2018, and I went down, and there was a woman I met who was on the panel with me, and she said, Mr. Garland, I'm one of the dancers that danced with Arthur Mitchell before he made Dance Theatre of Harlem. I did not know that Mr. Mitchell had been going to Brazil for 2 years before forming Dance Theatre of Harlem. It was pretty much a done deal. And he was so moved by the death of Dr. King that he went back. And as this woman said, she said, we were really sorry when he came back and said, I'm going to stay in America. I'm going to start a company there in the community I came from. But they said they also understood. So part of moving forward for me is sort of completing that promise. I and the organization are still very much connected to Brazil. There are still wonderful, fabulous Brazilians and Afro-Brazilians there that are fabulously talented and looking to work. And so that's part of one of the things moving forward. I call it completing the promise.
I love that.
So that's one of my big top 10 goals. And then on that note, also reaching out to other places, like there are ballet schools. And I was talking to a colleague, a former Dance Theatre of Harlem alum, Ayun Harrison, who's a professor at Duke now, Jamaican. I was like, Ayun, like, where are the Jamaican ballet dancers? Where are the Dominican Republic ballet dancers? Like, they're there, but our communication with them has become very stilted and kind of slight. So things like that I'm really so interested in. And because we were always part of a internationalized group of dancers. And so I want to find it again.
Right. I feel like part of the model of having choreographer, artistic directors has changed. Now you have a lot of people that either are not interested or they prefer to kind of punt that opportunity to other people that are maybe more experienced or just more distinguished at it. So how do you feel like your role as choreographer is going to impact your role as artistic director and what benefits that might bring to the position?
I think my role is going to be developing choreographers, and I still have to figure out exactly how that's going to go. Right. But it's a very, very, being, for instance, in the San Francisco program that I'm about to be a part of, there are 9 choreographers, I'm at varying levels of kind of experience with an organization that is that big, and sometimes I'm looking at what some of the choreographers are doing right now and feeling that if they had a little more of a support system underneath them, that they could make choices that would be better not only for themselves but also for the institution. Right. At times the institution's goals and how they operate can be at loggerheads with the choreographer, and it doesn't have to be, or you don't have to wait until that point, Right. And so part of my role, as I see it, is supporting, creating choreographers and artists that are a little more understanding of the whole. This goes back to that other conversation, just understanding the whole picture, the big picture.
Right.
You know?
I was actually going to ask that because since Arthur Mitchell did offer you this template sort of for exploring outside of just your role as a dancer or a choreographer, how are you thinking that you might also do the same for the dancers of this generation?
You know, I'm giving them opportunities that are crafted, but also that are guided.
Right.
I had a wonderful, I have to say, there were parts about my Juilliard experience just because of the nature of the time that were challenging as a Black person. But the training itself, both musically and in terms of composition, and then also the work, I really feel that the work, meaning the dance work, what I got to see, I think was so instrumental in creating me, you know. And so one of the things that I'm really, really hell bent on is having choreographers study classic works. And for our environment, you know, they do that in music all the time. Like, you really can't become a musician unless you know Bach. Or if you're a painter, you got to be able to do some kind of a nude, you know, like, or something, or, you know, like they've created these kind of stepping stones of experience. And so I feel like some ballets that are not produced now, one, sometimes money reasons, two, sometimes interest, but sometimes are made to educate, you know. That way you won't have people saying, where are all the female choreographers? And I was like, have you ever seen Les Noces? Like, have you ever seen the Jinska's Les Noces? Like, just stop it. You know, like, I mean, and sure, we could always have more female choreographers, more female leadership, but you must contextualize all of that. And for instance, there's a ballet called by Nijinsky, Le Biche.
Yes, we were just recently talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Le Biche has a transgendered role in it. You know, the lead role that Virginia did with us is actually a guy,
right?
You know, that is trans, you know, and so and it's an hysterical ballet. It's so good. Yeah. So good. So someone was somewhere and they were like, we need to start this. No one's ever done that. And I was like, no, Nijinsky did it. No, Nijinsky did it.
Right.
So,
So DTH has long been an extensive touring, had an extensive touring schedule. I'm wondering how you feel like historically that's been important to the company. And if that's something, obviously, you know, the company's going to Houston shortly. Like, is that something that you're hoping to continue? And if you know what your interest in touring is,
you know, it's always striking a balance. You know, our touring is great, but I'm also very much interested in creating a larger footprint in New York City. You know, so that's part of, you know, just out of necessity because our board of directors is here. You know, but yes, touring will definitely remain as part of our makeup as an organization or as a company, because there are people out there that need to still see us, need to still experience us.
Right. So just before we wrap up, we love to ask this question of artistic directors. If you had one dream production, one dream project for Dance Theatre of Harlem, you have no budget. There's no problem. You can go over budget if you want, just like you have before we hear. You can do whatever you want. Is there something that you would just really love to do with the company?
Well, we're coming up on our anniversary of Creole Giselle in 2024, 2025. Creole Giselle was our resetting the Giselle in Louisiana. I am so wanting to redo that idea. And so stay tuned is all I can say right now.
Do you have an idea when the last time the company performed that was?
The full thing was way back in the early 90s.
Right.
Yeah, you know. But it became much too expensive to tour.
You know? Sure. Yeah.
It's so
So
beautiful.
I have some ideas.
Ooh, keep us
Yeah.
posted on that. That sounds very exciting.
I'm dying to see that again. You know, we had a great success during the pandemic when we aired the television recording. Well, we premiered a television version on NBC in the 80s, in the late 80s. And so we rebroadcast that during the pandemic because everybody was doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
And it got was so successful, and people were like, wow, that was amazing. So looking to do that again.
Yeah.
And I think with the women in the company right now, I mean, we've already talked about, like, I watched that Corsair Odalise clip like a million times. You know, it's like, I think
beautiful.
you've got a deep bench of ballerinas that I'm sure are chomping at the bit to do real Giselle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. We really enjoyed speaking with you, and we hope that everyone in the Houston area will see you guys February 3rd and 4th at Performing Arts Houston. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.